This conference will now be recorded.
Hi everyone, welcome to Satyendra Kumar Pega Training. As part of last session, we have worked on leave details screen, right? So now today we are going to work on approvals process. Okay. So whenever employee submit the leave details screen, so we have to route an assignment to the supervisor of that employee. Okay. So here supervisor is nothing but a manager. Okay. So now let's create a case. So this is employee information and we have leave details. So once we submit it, it has to be routed to the this employee manager. Okay. So if you look at the employee page on the clipboard, so so we have a project details, right? Like so every employee is associated with a project ID. Okay. So I have logged in with this operator ID and I belongs to this project, let's say PRJ06. And in this project details page, so these details are getting from project details data type, right? So here we have a supervisor ID that is T20004. So this assignment has to be routed to this supervisor. Okay. So once it is routed to this supervisor, or we call it manager, so manager can approve or reject or send back to employee. Okay. So if manager send back to the employee should be able to submit the request again. Okay. So and manager has to provide some comment. So whenever it is rejected or sent back to employee, and employee will look at those comments and will resubmit the request. Okay. And whenever we route an assignment to the manager, we are also sending auto-generated email stating that this case has been moved to your work list. Okay. So here, so we have missed providing leave type. Okay. So we need a leave type here and where employee can select the value from the drop down and can select it from date and to date. Okay. So in our application, so we have the various leave types, right? So we can see all the leave types here in the leave details data type. So let's create a property called leave type. Looks like this is already exists. So we can create a new type property with all these values. Okay, I already created here. So similarly, if you haven't created, so we can create a leave type with all these values. Okay. So now let's use this property in the leave details screen. So go to the section called employee leave details and specify the leave type property. And this should be a drop down, so we can change the control here. And let's make it mandatory and provide some placeholder so that user must select value from the drop down. And so similarly, so we can also make these fields mandatory. Okay. So where user has to select from date into date and can submit the screen. Okay. So let's check in this. So I have enabled checkout for this rule set. So you can also enable the checkout option for the rule set and you can practice, you know, checkout and check-in option every time so you make some changes. Okay. So now let's define a separate stage for approval process. Okay. So today we are going to route an assignment to the manager, but so we will also be routing to the HR manager based on certain conditions. Okay. So let's go to the case type and create a stage called approval process or simply approvals. And the flow would be to add a new process called approval process. And the first assignment would be manager approvals. So let's click on configure view here and we need properties, let's say approvals, and this would be a drop down property. So let's select pick list and we can configure the values here. Okay. So let's say approve, reject, and additional info. So this is like sending the request back to the employee. Okay. So let's submit this and we need a comments property and it should be a text area. So text paragraph is nothing but text area so that user can enter, like manager can enter the comments. Now let's click on submit. So once we submit it, so internally the process will be created, flow action and also flow. Okay. So let's save this one. So once you click on save, the rules will be created internally. So when you configure view, when you click on this, and so the flow action and section also will be created. Okay. So now let's open the process from here. So you see a flow action called manager approvals with the same name. You can also see the section. Okay. So now let's specify the operator ID in the assignment. So this should be a supervisor of employee. So it will be there on the clipboard, right? Let's say I'm the employee. I have created a request. So meaning I submitted the leave details and on the clipboard we'll have a property called project details, page property, and we have a supervisor ID. Okay. So let's take the project details dot supervisor ID. and specify here. So specify the comments. Now let's take this one, manager approval section, and manager should be able to see all the information submitted by employee. Okay, so let's add employee details and leave details sections here. Okay. So here I am going to use the dynamic layout group. Sorry, not this one. So we have a layout group. Okay. So here we have a tab option. So where we can see the sections in the tab wise. Okay. So let's call this section called employee details. That is employee info, right? And similarly, let's call another section called employee leave details. So by default, we have a header called title. So let's change that. And this one would be a leave details. And these details should be read only, meaning manager should not be able to edit the data. So in order to make it read only, so in the presentation tab, so we have read only always. Let's select that. And comments should be mandatory whenever approvals is equal to reject or additional info required. Okay. So let's open this property. So the standard value is what we store in the clipboard, meaning in the database, and prompt value is what we show to the user. Okay. So we don't need to store the standard value same as prompt value, so we can also change it. Let's say I'm putting additional info or ADD info like this. Okay. So whenever users select additional info required, the clipboard value will be add info. Okay. So I'm putting the condition using this one. Or like so if you want, you can also use this one. So but like so if we have the lengthy value, so we'll use the different value as a standard one, right? So like we store the codes. So let's take this one and put the condition for the comments. So comments should be mandatory only, sorry, they should be based on the expression or when rule also. So approvals is equal to add info, that is additional info required, or resume. So we need to check in this, right? And let's enable this as run required condition on client so that whenever you change the value, so immediately, immediately it will be mandatory. Okay, it doesn't require to update to the clipboard. So you know about client side validation, right? So if we have the value in the browser, so it gets validated, it gets checked that value, the condition. Okay. So now let's put the comments. Now let's submit the request and see whether it is going for manager. Okay. So before that, so we have to make sure, so we have this operator ID exists. Okay. So let's go to the PRJ06. So that is T2004. So this should be a manager operator. I think I already created that operator ID. Let me show you that. So this operator is a manager, and when we route an assignment, okay, when I submit the leave details, the request will be routed to the this manager, and this manager can open that assignment and can verify the information entered by the employee and can decide to approve or reject or even to send back to the employee. Okay. So now let's submit the request. So I'm going to select personal leave and submitting this. So here, so we can also, update the operator ID. So saying that this has been routed to the manager like that. So we'll see that later. So now let's log in with the manager. Into 004, right? And we have routed an assignment that is L-13002. So this is employee information and this is the leave detail. And if employee upload the documents, so those should be attached to the case. Okay. So here manager can see all the documents attached. And here, so we can have the proper alignment, okay, but you need to understand the functionality. Okay. So let's say approve, it is not mandatory. So if I select reject, it is getting as mandate, right? Even if I select this one, it will be mandate. Okay. So if manager uh, submit this stating that, let's say, additional info required or please upload the valid document, something like this. It has to be routed to the employee. So, but we need to handle that, right? So, if managers submit this, so it is completed. Okay. So, but so if managers select additional info required, it has to be routed to the employee who created a leave request. So for that, so we need to use change stage up. So let's add a decision here. Okay. So create a when rule call is additional info required. So we can create a when rule from here. So whenever the approvals is equal to add info, so that is the backend value, right? So if you look at this approvals property, so we need to take this one. Let's go to the flow. Let's create approvals. Let's create a when rule called is additional info required, and if approvals is equal to add info. So if this condition is satisfied, so we need to change the stage. We need to send back to the submission stage. Okay. So let's add a smart shape. Uh, let's go to the automations. So we have changed to the next stage. So that is to go to the next stage and change to a stage. So to change it to the any of the stage available in the case type. So here I am providing submission. Okay, is additional info required. So when it is changed to submission stage, the person who's, who submitted the previous assignment, meaning who completed the previous assignment, will be able to work on the employee details. But it should not be the case, right? It has to be routed to the employee who created a case. So this can be handled in different ways. So, one way is, so let's go to the initial flow, that is collect details, and we can specify the, you know, route option like px create operator. So if I'm creating a case, it will be assigned to me. And even if you change the stage to the submission, it will be assigned to the, operator who created the case. So we can use like this. So now let's submit the request. So this is L-13003. So manager is sending back to the employee. So now let's see. So this is the corresponding one. So we'll see this one. Okay. So now let's go back to the employee. Open the case from here. It is L-13003. Okay. So this is the one, right? Like, so I can begin this and can resubmit the case. So we can also directly move to the employee leave details instead, again performing from employee details. Okay. So we don't need to change employee details, right? Like, so basically, so we should be able to change only employee leave details. Okay, that you can handle it. So instead, so when you use the change stage, initially you put some condition, whether it is coming back from manager. If it is coming back from manager for additional info, you directly move to the leave details screen so that when employee open the case, directly will be landed to this one and can see the comments here and can modify the information accordingly and can submit. Okay. So here we can add, that comments property and we can put visible condition. If comments is not equal to null, then only we need to display that one. Okay. That also you can handle it. Clear? So now we will be also working on the upload document scenario because if user select medical leave or paternity or maternity, employee must upload the documents. Okay. So, and whatever the documents we uploaded should be routed to the manager as well. So it will be attached to the case and manager can also verify those documents. But manager should not be able to delete the documents. But as the employee, I uploaded some documents. I can open and I can also delete it. But managers can only open the documents and can review those, but not delete. So these kind of personal requirements we will be, covering in next session. So now, so let's look at this correspondence one. So we have a functionality. So out of the box functionality, whenever we route an assignment to the work list, you know, we can send an email to that employee or that, operator. So if you go to the settings, I think I enable this. If you go to the notifications, email user when assignment is routed to the work list. You just click again. So now if I submit the case, I should not see that correspondence issue. Now, what is the significance of this one? So whenever we route an assignment to the work list, the email will be sent to that person, okay, that operator, stating that, you know, uh, the PY label, which is the case type, and PY ID is a case, and move to your work list. Okay, let's say auto loan ID move to your work list like this, and we can also put the subject here. If you don't put the subject, so this one will be considered by default. Now question is from where the from email will be taken. So that is from email account, right? So we have to make sure the from details are configured in the email account and that is connected to the server so that it will take the email ID from the operator profile and the email will be sent. Okay. So now let's look at that. So by default, you know, when Taga is sending the email using out of the box notification functionality, so it will check whether we have the email account with the class group name. Okay. If it is not available, it will check the email account with the name default. So we have a out of the box email account called default. Let's look at that. So integration resources, email account, and this one, right? So we can create a new email account with the class group name, or else we can also modify this. So let's take the default one, and email provider is Google Gmail, and I'm changing these default details. Let's say user ID is my email ID, and we have to ensure we enter the valid password, and this email is associated with the from email. Okay, so this can be usually same as SMTP user ID. So this is SMTP user ID which uses to send an email. Okay, so this is from email which will be associated with you know uh, the outgoing email. So whatever the email we use here will be you know uh, will be seen as a from. So I will see you, I will show you that one like so when it is attached to the case. So and this is the SMTP code and this is the port number. So now let's create a case. Let's submit and we need to enable this one. So let's enable this. Now submit the request again. Now we don't see an issue because I have configured the from account. So we can also click on test connection, whether it is connected to the server. So we see the success, right? So that is the reason. So we see the email attached to the case, and this is the from which we used here. So if we use, let's say abc@gmail.com, so we see here that. But when sent an email to the external party, so it will be like this. So now I received the email, and this is the SMTP user ID, and I use the same email for this manager, that is T2004. Okay, so this is the reason the email has been sent to this email ID. Yes. So if I put, let's say, just satya@gmail.com, and this is the display name. Let's say I'm putting Satyendra. So when the email sent to the external party, so we'll see the display name as like this. So if you look at this one, now you see the from email here. So that is this one. But when you look at the actual email, the from would be different. That is SMTP user ID. So that is how it configures. And the display name, I will show you the display name also. Just give me a second. So behind that, so there is a background processing rule, so which will process the emails. Just give me a second. Now you see. So display name is Satyendra, and the from is SMTP user ID, and this is the two email address. So this is the out of the box functionality. Okay. So which will read the from account from the default email account. Okay. If not, if you do not have a email account with the classroom name. Yeah. Yeah. So that's about today's class, and we will discuss the next part. The next session. Like so, we will be implementing a few other things. So it's about today's session. So let's summarize what we did. So we have added a new stage called approval process with one assignment that is called manager approvals. And whenever we submit the leave details request, the email is being sent to the manager, okay, and also routing to the manager of that employee. And manager can, review the details and can approve or reject or send back to the employee. If it is sent back to the employee, so employee can reopen the case and can see the comments and can also resubmit it. So if manager approves it, the corresponding leaves should be deducted from the database table. So this one we will cover in the next class. And also there will be some additional approvals required that is called HR approvals. Let's say employee is applying for maternity leave. So in that case, it must go to the HR manager. Okay. So once the HR manager is approved, then only the corresponding leaves will be deducted from employee leave balance. So we'll discuss more about these things in the next session. Thank you.